In 2005, Capcom would release a survival horror game that would bend the rules of the genre, an experiment in design and gameplay, a redefinition of the formula they themselves had crafted. And that game was Resident Evil 4. Of course, things sold like 3 million copies in 2005, was the most critically acclaimed game of the year. But a couple of months later, Capcom would redefine a different kind of survival horror, the stalker horror experience, and that game was Haunting Ground. Expanding on the building blocks of the Clock Tower series, Haunting Ground took the run and hide gameplay, added several other layers and mechanics, created a disturbing set of complex antagonists, and made the beating heart of the story the relationship between a young woman and the dog that she rescues from mistreatment. So today, let's enter Belli Castle to experience Capcom's forgotten survival horror masterpiece, Haunting Ground. Haunting Ground is a third-person survival horror dog training simulator developed by Capcom and released for the PlayStation 2 in 2005. Its original title in Japan was Demento, which, as we'll come to see, better represents what's actually going on with the story and characters than the English title Haunting Ground, but neither are really great titles. Demento because it's just kind of silly, and Haunting Ground because there are no ghosts, the places you visit aren't haunted. You could reach and try to make a case to justify the haunting part of the title, and we'll touch on that later, but in my mind, it's a real stretch. Anyway, Haunting Ground had the unfortunate fate of being released a couple of months after Resident Evil 4, which changed the face of survival horror and action gaming at large for quite a while. This led to Haunting Ground just being kind of shrugged off by most critics. Capcom didn't invest too heavily in marketing for the game either, so it also didn't sell all that well. But the lack of confidence in Haunting Ground was already deeply baked into its development. The team had a desire to make a survival horror game with a female lead, but were certain that it would fail because they thought big tough gamer boys wouldn't want to play as just some girl. So they gave her sexy outfits. Boob physics ? And a canine companion named Hewie, who is a king among kings and the real hero of this game. That's not to completely dismiss Fiona, the avatar that you actually control. She's a complex character who has more skills at her disposal than it initially appears, and the relationship between Fiona and the handsome white shepherd Hewie is, in my opinion, one of the biggest aspects that holds the game together, both in terms of the gameplay and in the overall story. Going back to Capcom's unease at marketing a female protagonist in a horror game, though, I don't really get it. Konami's Silent Hill 3 had come out about a year and a half earlier with Heather Mason as the lead character and was a critical and commercial success. Capcom had also already had their own successes with female characters in the Resident Evil series. The original game featured Jill Valentine as one of two main playable characters. RE2 had Claire Redfield as one of two main playable characters.
Who are you? What are you doing here?
Resident Evil 3 featured Jill again in her own standalone adventure, and Code Veronica had Claire yet again in her own standalone adventure. Not to mention Dino Crisis, then there was Square's Parasite Eve. This list could go on, and all of those games were hugely successful. So what gives? I don't think it's just a cut and dry case of the developers being misogynistic. I think they were actually worried about their previous failure with Clock Tower 3, a game that Haunting Ground rips whole swaths of its gameplay off of, so much so that it's usually considered a spin-off or homage to the Clock Tower series. Capcom had acquired the rights to Clock Tower after Human Entertainment, the original developers, closed their doors in early 2000. Capcom then developed their own third entry into the main Clock Tower series. Both Clock Tower 3 and Haunting Ground feature female protagonists who wander through old-fashioned levels, in Clock Tower 3's case because of time travel. Both games feature chase and hide mechanics, panic systems, and no ways for the player to really defeat enemies outside of boss fights. I guess I should also mention Rule of Rose, which came out a year after Haunting Ground and also features a girl and a dog escaping from a psychologically twisted set of antagonists. Just because if I don't mention it, people will probably yell at me about it in the comments. Back to Clock Tower 3 though, that game is great in terms of its presentation and story. Gameplay-wise though, it kinda sucks. Honestly, seems like the perfect thing for me to cover on the channel at some point. Rule of Rose too. But I digress. Clock Tower 3 was met with mediocre to bad reviews and poor sales, yet Capcom still wanted to iterate on the run-and-hide gameplay and double down with a female protag. So maybe it was a kind of shucks tactic of acting naive and kicking rocks, hoping it would drum up support for Haunting Ground in the lead up to its release. Unfortunately, it didn't really work. Critically, the game fared a bit better than Clock Tower 3, but it was still a commercial failure. And with the runaway success of Resident Evil 4, Capcom wouldn't return to this hide from the indestructible enemies until a boss fight kind of game design until Resident Evil 7, about 12 years later. So I think it was more that they just weren't confident in the actual gameplay design, more so than worrying about having a female protagonist, but then just blamed it all on poor Fiona. Hasn't she been through enough, Capcom? She's already got all these creeps trying to get to her womb.
Let me into your womb!
Yeah, maybe I should explain the story a bit. As established, you take the role of Fiona Belli. The intro cutscene that plays when you first start the game features lots of red and lots of skin, as Fiona walks through the halls of a castle with nothing but a bedsheet wrapped around her. After starting a new game, we don't get much as far as story setup. Fiona is already a captive inside some kind of cellar, and as she's unconscious, a large, deformed man reaches for her through the bars of her cage. Lightning and a crash of thunder scares away the big guy, though. There's a brief flash of a car crash, and Fiona awakens. Realizing the cage is now unlocked, she exits with nothing but a bedsheet to cover her modesty. From beneath a nearby table, a dog jumps out at her. And she finds a collar nearby with the name Hewie on it. With that, she exits the cellar and finds herself inside the yard of a large castle estate. From here, we gain control and are free to wander around and get the lay of the land. There's not much to do initially, what with Fiona being practically naked, but there are a few landmarks to take note of. An old tree in the corner of the yard, a locked door with a hole in the wall off to the side, too small for Fiona herself to fit through, she comments, some cages and a kennel area, as well as a large locked gate. A set of stairs leads to a second floor landing, and then a third floor with an actual open door. And here we find a bedroom.
I've gathered some clothes for you.
Wait, don't go. Excuse me, but where are we? And how did I get here?
Yes, Master. We will keep her here for a while. I will make sure she stays comfortable.
The voice acting in Haunting Ground is actually pretty good. The maid here is named Daniella, and I love her emotionless delivery. It's perfect. We'll see more of her later. Don't worry. On the bed, there's a change of clothes. While changing, Fiona is watched from behind the eyes of this gallant old gent painting.
Wait a minute. I remember being in the car with...
There's a lot of objectification of Fiona happening, which we'll see more of throughout, and at first you might be inclined to think it's just horny game developers, and, well, some of it is. But there are story reasons for Fiona's treatment here, which we'll look at more as we go. With her new tight-fitting outfit, Fiona is free to explore the castle. At this point, Fiona also gets access to several additional moves. She can kick, backstep, and crouch. Kicking can break objects, but can also be used to attack enemies. It's nothing more than a way to get some space, though. It doesn't do much damage. Backstepping also isn't all that effective. A lot of the time you're running from enemies, so the backstep is mainly used to perform the charge move. By pressing backstep and immediately tapping the kick button, Fiona will lunge forward. This is useful for some puzzles and during most boss fights. Crouching is used to hide behind obstacles and in shadows, making it harder for enemies to discover her. Fiona can also crouch to recover stamina after a chase sequence or after taking damage from an enemy. Once we get some items, Fiona will be able to equip and throw things as well as set traps on the ground. It's a simple mechanic, and I honestly didn't use it much during my playthroughs, but the items can be extremely helpful in certain situations. She can also push some objects in the environment. Hope you like block pushing puzzles. Don't worry, there are thankfully only a couple throughout the whole game. But pushing can also be used to block doorways with objects to keep out pursuers, which is a neat mechanic that's introduced early but is woefully underutilized throughout the game. And that's about it for Fiona's actions. We'll get some more control options once we meet up with our dog buddy later. Much like the yard outside, there are several things to note just in this bedroom alone. The ticking grandfather clock acts as a save point. Any clock you run across throughout the game can be used to save, even a sundial. There are also these unsettling paintings of a young and old man facing each other in the area near Fiona's bed. We've already seen that the old man portrait acts as an old-timey spying point, but there are some interesting details about these two paintings that we'll look at much later. The bedroom may look comforting. I mean, check out that cozy fireplace. But listen to this background music. Aside from the foreboding piano, there's also this strange, squishing, squashing sound effect mixed in. It's very bizarre. The sound design in Haunting Ground is really fantastic. It's not quite as in-your-face and disturbing as a Silent Hill game, but there are some unsettling elements that hide beneath the surface and keep the tension up, even in quiet moments like this one. There are also softer, more emotional tracks that stuck with me even after I finished the game. Hewie's theme reminded me of a child's music box, and it's a really comforting piece that gives you a reprieve from the otherwise fearful atmosphere of the rest of the game. I also love the little musical stings that play when you find items or discover a puzzle that needs to be solved. Visually, the game is spectacular. I think the PS2 is peak graphics. Games like this, Valkyrie Profile 2, Final Fantasy XII, Eco, Shadow of the Colossus, Okami, Dark Cloud 2, Rogue Galaxy, Metal Gear Solid 3, Black, Gran Turismo 4, Odin Sphere, Time Splitters 2. I mean, do I need to continue? There are plenty of others. List what you got in the comments. But yeah, Haunting Ground is drop dead gorgeous. The character models are so good, and the facial expressions on Fiona are just amazing. She actually doesn't have all that many spoken lines throughout the game, so a lot of her character is communicated through her expressions and movement. Speaking of that, character movements were actually motion captured, including Hewie's, and the team did a fantastic job making the human characters all move and carry themselves differently. Fiona is very tense and runs with her arms kind of swaying. She always looks scared and uneasy. The deformed guy from the opening, whose name we'll soon learn is Debilitas, is a big, lumbering brute who has a lot of weight and power. Daniella strides confidently around the castle. She moves like a worker bee, fitting since she's the maid and needs to go around cleaning all the time. Another character we'll meet later, Riccardo, has a kind of heavy, hunched comportment. And Lorenzo, we'll talk about Lorenzo later. The smooth animations also give way to really smooth controls. Fiona feels very easy to move around. There were only a few times I got stuck on an object in the environment, and that was usually due to panic. The game doesn't feature tank controls, which helps add to the smoothness. Outside the bedroom, we're given a small portion of the castle to explore, and I love the environments and art direction in this game. The brown and gray color palette really grounds haunting ground. Probably should have chosen a better phrase there. But yeah, the color palette, despite its muted tones, doesn't feel drab or boring. It makes the castle feel at turns old and unused, but also cozy and welcoming. There are also areas that make use of plenty of color, and there's contrast everywhere. I mean, just look right here. The candlelight outside the bedroom doorway gives off a warm glow in direct opposition to the harsh whiteness of the electric lamp hanging from the ceiling just a few steps away. Just the fact that you have this juxtaposition of old candlelight with modern electric lighting is already beginning a theme of old versus new, comfort versus discomfort, safety versus danger. We're going to see a lot of these kinds of opposites at work in Haunting Ground, and the environments themselves become integral parts of the story. So, don't mind me, but I'm going to be luxuriating in these details throughout the video. The camera work is fantastic as well. When you first enter an area, you'll be dealing with a fixed camera angle, but since the environments are fully 3D, the camera will follow Fiona, swooping, tilting, or tracking. It's really well implemented, and I never had any complaints about the camera placement or the movement of the camera while playing. The controls can get a bit wonky sometimes when the camera angle switches. Usually if you continue holding the direction you're moving in when the camera angle changes, you'll keep going, but if you let go, you're going to have to reorient in relation to where the camera is now placed. And that can get a bit annoying, especially while being chased, but it's a minor complaint. Also, notice that we can open and close doors manually. For the love of all things, leave the doors open. In the next hallway, there's a pillar with a splatter of blood. If Fiona inspects it, we get introduced to another mechanic, the panic mode. Witnessing distressing sights, getting attacked by enemies, and even getting too close to enemies or hearing them do something menacing can increase Fiona's panic level. At first, the effects are subtle. Fiona may stop in her tracks and the screen may blur a bit. As panic increases, the screen colors will start to invert. Fiona will stumble and become more difficult to control. And finally, when she fully panics, you lose all control of her and she runs wildly. All you can do is try to steer her away from walls and other objects as she'll just bump into them and fall down. At the end, she'll just stay on the ground and crawl slowly, usually giving the pursuer ample time to deliver a finishing blow. Panic can be reduced with certain items. The same goes for stamina. While being chased, Fiona will become slower as she gets winded from running, so you'll need to either hide or use items to replenish her stamina. Fiona's actions and the screen effects are the only indications of her stamina and panic levels. There are no meters or other ways to gauge her condition, even within the menus. But you really don't need more than this. The visual effects tell you everything you need to know. And we get to see these mechanics put into use shortly because at the end of the hallway, we run into Debilitas again. The big guy has an interest in dolls and seems to view Fiona as one of his playthings. Run away. There are actually a couple of ways to avoid Debilitas here, but only if you've played the game before and know what you're doing. The developer intended way is to run all the way back to the bedroom. You can shut the doors behind you now, but Debilitas doesn't move that quickly, and we're not running far, so it really doesn't matter. Back in the bedroom, we'll get a prompt near the bed and be able to hide underneath it. This will initiate a first-person view with the phrase hiding on screen. Unfortunately, we can't move Fiona's view around while she's hiding, which prevented me from getting good footage of some of the pursuers searching for Fiona. There are several set hiding spots like this throughout the game, and there are also some that can be interacted with to trigger special cutscenes and cause enemies to be incapacitated for short amounts of time. In addition to these designated and special hiding spots, Fiona can also hide in closets and dressers, behind doors and other objects, as well as in bushes. In these situations, the camera will cut to the pursuer and you'll see them search for her. When a pursuer leaves the area while you're in a game designated hiding spot, you'll get a coast clear message. In the other hiding spots, the camera will cut back to the normal point of view. Take note though, you're not really safe until the background music returns. Pursuers can hear you, and if they're not far enough away to despawn, they'll come back. Hide in the same spot too often and Fiona can be found more easily. So you need to vary up your hiding spots and also sometimes just run far enough away from enemies. From now on, Debilitas can and will show up at random as we're exploring. There are a few scripted moments where he'll show up too. You can tell when a pursuer is around because the background music will drop out, and when they get close, you'll hear their footsteps.
My little pink meat pie.
This whole pursuer-stalker mechanic is the main thing that may turn off most people, but it's really not that bad. The pursuers show up enough to be threatening and keep you on your toes, but they never get annoying. Well, except for a tower climb section near the end, but aside from that, I thought they were really well implemented. I'm not someone who enjoys horror games where you need to just run and hide. The Clock Tower series, the Outlast games, Amnesia, honestly, not a big fan. So I was really surprised with how much this mechanic did not bother me in Haunting Ground. I think it's well balanced here, and you've got enough at your disposal to evade and avoid enemies to make it tense, yet fair. They also can't enter puzzle rooms, so that's a huge relief. You can take your time figuring those out without worrying about being interrupted and chased all around. With Debilitas gone, for now, Fiona can continue to explore the castle. Eventually she'll find her way to a music room with a piano playing in the background. As she's about to pick up a key on a nearby table, the piano cuts abruptly.
Ah, Fiona. I see you finally awakened. There's something that I've wanted to show you for quite some time. Pull away that sheet behind you. That, my dear, is what you will become in the future. Go ahead. You may touch it. You will be mine, Fiona.
So Fiona's going to become a pregnant tree? If you say so. The key we picked up unlocks a door to a new area of the castle. We also get a short cutscene introducing us to the luminescence. In the hallway where we first ran into Debilitas, there was a study, and a chalkboard there had a note about these little floating orbs of light. They're tiny creatures that respond to Azoth. We don't know much about Azoth yet, unless of course you've majored in alchemy, which between that and philosophy, it's probably a toss-up for the most useless university degree. Don't worry, philosophy majors, I have a degree in English, so I'm right there with you. Azoth is sometimes referred to as the Philosopher's Stone. It's an alchemical solvent or universal remedy that is symbolized by the caduceus. Did you say caduceus? Yeah, I said caduceus, which is related to the essence of life. According to alchemical study, all living things possess some Azoth, and for women, it's usually found in the womb. For reasons we'll learn of later on, the denizens of this place want Fiona's Azoth, because Fiona herself possesses a high concentration of it within her.
Let me into your womb!
That's all you need to really know without being spoiled. Anyway, back to the luminescence. In terms of gameplay, they're annoyances. If Fiona bumps into a luminescent, they burst and send her into varying states of panic, which is not good. They can follow from room to room, but can be blocked by shutting doors. I also found that you can kind of cheese them by running through a doorway and waiting for them to appear. If you time it right, when you run back through that doorway, they'll disappear and you won't suffer their effects. Neat. Continuing on, we arrive at the kitchen, and after kicking down some boards blocking the stairs, we can enter a basement and find our first map, or rather castle sketch, of Belli Castle. Hey, That's Fiona's last name. You can use the map in your inventory and then check the map tab to see the layout, but honestly, the environmental and level design in Haunting Ground is so good, I never looked at the maps except to get footage of them for the video. Every room and hallway is unique, and there are several shortcuts to unlock and alternate paths to take, so I never really got lost. Both the castle proper and the old mansion that you'll eventually unlock feature designs that loop back on themselves, which I'm a huge fan of. Back upstairs, we meet our friend Debilitas again. That breathing in the background is ominous as hell. As Fiona is about to be captured, the voice we heard in the music room tells Debilitas to back off. He looks so sad. This man introduces himself as Riccardo and reminds Fiona of the car accident and her parents' deaths. He also informs her that she is the sole surviving heir of Belli Castle. The news causes Fiona to faint. Dude, 6 sandals. Fiona awakens back in the bedroom, and it's nighttime now. Hearing whining outside, she checks the window and sees a dog tied to a large tree in the yard. We gotta go down and rescue that poor guy. Don't worry, buddy, I'm on my way. Whoa, wait a minute. Check out these lights with the bugs floating around them. That is such a cool detail. I told you, this game is absolutely stunning. Oh, shit. Oh, yeah. I'm coming, buddy.
Go now, and don't get caught this time. Go.
After rescuing Hewie, Fiona returns to her bedroom to find a surprise waiting for her. Debilitas. Heyo. It's so disturbing how he crawls towards Fiona here. This is our combat tutorial for Hewie. Hewie can be commanded by using the right analog stick. When a pursuer is near, up sends him to attack. While he's attacking, you can press up again to encourage him, and he'll sometimes hold on to an enemy for longer. Down will get Hewie to stop attacking. R3 will have Hewie stay, and if you time it right when a pursuer is near, you can press up and Hewie will do a more powerful attack. It's difficult to pull this off correctly though. Outside of battle, the actions Hewie performs change. Up sends him to search for items and interact with objects. Down will call him to Fiona.
Hewie,
Right will praise him.
good boy.
Left will scold him.
No.
R3 has Fiona give him a sit and stay command. Pressing R3 again while he's sitting will have Fiona ask him for his paw and a shake.
Shake.
Hewie also stops and growls when pursuers or other enemies are nearby, giving you an added alarm. He has his own stamina, as well as items such as chicken and beef jerky that can restore his status. But Hewie is more than just a tool or a weapon. He is the goodest boy, and you need to earn his respect and trust. When you first meet him, he won't always listen to Fiona's commands. It may take several attempts just to get him to follow you. Praising helps raise his obedience and affection, as does giving him food and asking for shakes. But it's not all about positive reinforcement. Just like a real dog, Hewie sometimes needs to be scolded for not listening.
No.
otherwise he'll just be a spoiled brat. Dog training is about establishing a leader, and the developers here seem to have actually taken that into consideration to some degree with Hewie's AI. As you spend more time with Hewie, praising his good behavior and scolding his bad, getting him to help you with puzzles and fend off pursuers, his trust and affection for Fiona will grow. Where at first he sometimes stops and sits disinterestedly while following you around, growing bored of your constant calls for him to come, eventually, if you train him and treat him well, he'll follow without being called, sometimes even attack and distract enemies without your command. And instead of sitting bored as you shudder scared among the immense loneliness of these forlorn and unforgiving environments, he will sit next to you, tail wagging, staring up at you with complete affection and trust. Two friends, braving the unknown, together. As some of you know, if you've watched either my Q&A video or the gadget video, I have a dog, a 6-year-old Shih Tzu named Zoe. She is a divine creature who deserves nothing but treats, scratches, and playing ball. I think all dogs are too good for this world, and we mere humans don't deserve them. Shih Tzus specifically have very independent personalities and are not high on the obedience scale. I've heard it described that they hear what you're saying when you give commands and whatnot, but it just doesn't align with their goals. And man, I see proof of that every day. As mentioned, my dog's goals are food, scratches, and playing ball. In that order. We worked hard to train her though, and she's a good girl. But when I witnessed Hewie's aloofness and disinterested attitude upon first meeting him, I was reminded of Zoe, and I was determined to get Hewie to trust me. It took time, it took patience, it even took a few deaths, but I did it. If you remember that area out in the yard with the hole in the wall, you can send Hewie through and unlock the gate, giving you access to a dog training ground. You can even pick up a ball here to play fetch with Hewie later on when he's a bit friendlier. The way your relationship with Hewie develops and also becomes integral to your survival is such a masterstroke. It forms the emotional core of Haunting Ground's narrative. Both Hewie and Fiona are alone in this world, and fate, or just random chance, whatever you believe, has brought them together to find a way through this nightmare. It's beautiful. Not to mention, their relationship is a factor in which of the game's 3 endings you can get on your first playthrough. My dog-loving nature then makes it all the more painful to try to get the worst ending in the game. You can, if you have no soul, abuse Hewie. Scold him, kick him, feed him onions. He won't take kindly to your maltreatment though. He'll wander off mostly, and even attack you if you persist in your bullying. This, of course, makes the game harder, but it can also make it so that at a critical juncture in the story, he will leave you to your awful, awful fate. One last thing to mention about gameplay before moving on, just because I can't really find a good spot to fit this before spoiler territory. There's also a crafting system in the game. We've already had our hints of alchemy in the story, so throughout the areas you find holes in the walls that you can crawl through to wind up in an alchemy room with a device that allows you to create items. You'll find different medallions throughout the game which can be put into this machine, and then there's a mini game where you need to match up the colors of these spinning orbs. Different combinations result in different items, or nothing at all. You can mostly craft healing consumables for both Fiona and Hewie, along with different degrees of items that can be thrown at enemies or laid on the ground as traps. However, by matching most or all of the same colors, you can also create accessories and special equipment for Fiona, like a pair of boots that do extra damage, earrings that increase stamina recovery, or decrease the effects of panic mode. Crafting is incredibly helpful, so don't sleep on it. It does take some time to get used to the timing of the minigame though. It's worth learning it. There's also another way to earn additional items by typing special words into a nameplate maker at a certain point in the game. Anyway, now that we have Hewie at our side, dealing with Debilitas and the other pursuers we'll eventually meet becomes a bit more manageable. We can even launch our own counterattacks while Hewie has them incapacitated. There are 4 pursuers throughout the game, technically. The last one gets a bit complicated, but that's spoiler territory. Each have their own idiosyncrasies and ways of distracting and dealing with them, but they're each segmented into their own portion of the game, culminating in a boss fight that takes them out entirely, leading then to the next area and the next pursuer. Obviously, they get more tenacious and difficult to evade as the game goes on, but the game itself also gets more linear. The bulk of your playtime will be spent dealing with the first 2 antagonists, Debilitas and Daniella, in the most open-ended and free-flowing environments of the game. The final two pursuers show up in the last quarter of the playtime, and are less memorable because they just don't stick around as long, and the areas aren't as open, so you don't get a good sense of familiarity with those characters or the environments. But honestly, by that point, I felt like the game had gone on long enough, so I'm kind of glad it narrows and doesn't overstay its welcome. What I'm trying to say, in a roundabout fashion, is that I thought Haunting Ground was very well paced, so I'm just pointing out the narrowing focus and not really criticizing it. Haunting Ground took me about 8 hours to beat on my first playthrough, which is the perfect length for this type of game. A few more things to mention before getting into spoilers. There are several death traps that are fun to deal with, like the room full of eyes, the darkened room, and the tile-floored room with the crossbow-wielding suit of armor. There's always a unique death cutscene to watch in these situations. I also like this one hallway in the castle. It's a long stretch where the walls gradually narrow and then widen again to a door at the end of the hall. It gives a real feeling of claustrophobia. The physical spaces you pass through will start to become more and more, let's just say, unorthodox as the game progresses. Oh, and that doorway at the end of the hall leads into a nursery with an eerie doll in a rocking chair. A long, narrow passage that widens and opens into a nursery. Just let the symbolism of that sink in for a second. There are many moments of symbolism throughout Haunting Ground, and then a lot of outright just telling you to your face, hey, this is the weird, creepy stuff that's going on. And I like that back and forth. Getting captured by any of the pursuers results in some really disturbing game over moments. Nothing is shown on screen, but the audio is pretty intense and gut-wrenching at times, and I fear demonetization by showing them here. So I'll let you either find out for yourself by playing, or look them up on YouTube. As I mentioned, the game is not shy about objectifying Fiona. She's an object of desire for all of her pursuers, for childish reasons, jealous reasons, carnal reasons, mystical, spiritual reasons, and it all gets very complicated. It's not like each of the antagonists definitively represent one of these themes or another. It's messy, in a good way. And though there are moments of outright, straight-faced, maniacal screaming of intentions,
Let me into your womb!
I think both the subtlety and the over-the-top approaches that Haunting Ground vacillates between are both handled well, and it all goes along with the whole binary design ethos of the rest of the game. Like I said, there's a contrast to everything here. I guess I'm speaking kind of abstractly, but I'm trying to avoid too many spoilers. There's a lot to pick apart with this game's story and characters. So from here on out, let's get into the details. If you want to play Haunting Ground for yourself, I'd suggest bailing now. Despite its complex themes and character development, Haunting Ground is pretty thin on actual plot. It's very gameplay focused and uses a lot of environmental storytelling, which I think is fantastic. But there are a lot of implications and backstory elements not fully presented in the game that are worth discussing, so I'll be diving into that after giving a story synopsis. At this point, it probably goes without saying, but Haunting Ground is a psychological horror that contains some potentially disturbing subject matter, so viewer discretion is advised from here on out. It's a great game, and this is not something I normally do on the channel because I usually play, well, I won't say bad, but let's just say games that take a lot of patience to appreciate. But having said that, I highly recommend playing Haunting Ground if any of this sounds interesting to you. For those who've already played it or don't mind being spoiled though, it's that time. Our goal now is to escape the castle. As Fiona explores further, she gets a phone call in a parlor from some creep breathing into the receiver.
Fiona.
Who is this?
You must pay attention now, Fiona. Be wary of Riccardo.
Despite his creepiness, he does seem to be trying to help Fiona. Maybe she has an ally here. After this, another scripted chase occurs and part of a balcony crumbles. There are a few ways this can play out, but in my playthrough, Fiona fell, separating her from Hewie. You can also get it so that Debilitas will fall from the crumbling section of the balcony, and this will put him out of commission for a bit. Even though I only had Hewie at my side for a short while at this point, I immediately felt more vulnerable without him. This part also took me like half an hour to figure out how to get back to the broken balcony where Hewie was, and I'm pretty sure I ended up completing some stuff out of order, but it all worked out, which is just a testament to the good game design. You can even find the shack where Debilitas lives on the castle grounds. It's a shithole, naturally. And there's a cutscene that can happen here if you enter the shack with Debilitas chasing you, where you can distract him with his doll. Anyway, after opening some shortcuts, dropping a drawbridge, and evading Debilitas on my own a few times, I finally met up with Hewie again. Beyond the drawbridge is a building with a block-pushing puzzle, which will open a shortcut allowing Hewie to join you in this part of the castle. There's also a locked door where you can look through the keyhole and get a disconcerting scene between Daniella and Riccardo.
Where is he? Where is the old man? Where's he hiding? I won't let him touch her. Do you hear me, old man? The Azoth is mine.
We also learn some of the characters' motivations here. Riccardo mentions that Lorenzo wants Fiona, but Riccardo wants her for his own reasons. He wants the Azoth. Due to Riccardo being able to command Debilitas, it seems like the big guy is under Riccardo's control, but he can't quite rein in his impulses yet. It's not clear exactly where Daniella stands in all this. She appears to have some allegiance to Lorenzo, and also seems used to taking physical punishment. The turn towards the keyhole and the laugh at the end is a pretty clear indication she's also going to be someone Fiona is going to have to be wary of. Later, Fiona runs across some conspicuous holes in a wall and decides to stick her hand through Silent Hill style. This gives us a memo detailing how Riccardo has sealed off the castle, as well as a hint for how to access the old mansion. The note was written by and given to Fiona by Lorenzo. His was also the voice we heard on the phone earlier. Maybe he's one of the good guys. We can hold out hope, right? Eventually, after some more puzzling and exploration, Fiona and Hewie arrive at a chapel where a key hangs from a statue. Fiona's got the key to the old mansion now, but she's also got some company. And this is our showdown with Debilitas. Oh my god, that's such a freaky moment. You get much more of the mental instability with Debilitas going on. He waves his arms, smacks himself in the head, yells for Fiona.
Fiona!
There are two ways to deal with him. We can either kill him outright or break these contraptions at the side of the room to drop the chandelier on him. This affects your ending, and for my first playthrough I dropped the chandelier because I figured there was no way to actually kill him with Fiona's puny attacks, and these devices on the side kind of stick out. Using the bash move makes them break faster.
It's okay, Hewie. He can't come after us anymore. Good boy. Calm down, Hewie. It's over. It's okay, Hewie. It's okay.
Debilitas survives this, but seems to have been knocked to his senses and begs for Fiona's forgiveness. Then he leaves. You can actually find him again, alive and well, in his shack. He's non-hostile now and will even give Fiona a key, which we can make use of to enter a hidden room. But this situation isn't really useful until a second playthrough, so I'll come back to this later. Moving on, we've got the key to unlock the old mansion. So back in the block-pushing puzzle room, there's a door with a symbol on it that Fiona can use this key to open. Before she gets that chance, though, Daniella appears and announces the dinner is ready.
Dinner is served, miss. My creator said he made me the perfect woman. But I cannot taste or experience pleasure or feel pain.
Well, thanks for the meal.
I am not complete.
Yeah, okay then. Something must have been in that soup because Fiona's not feeling so hot. She heads back to the bedroom to rest, and while sleeping, she is, let's just say, lovingly caressed by Daniella.
I am not complete. Well, that went some kind of sideways. The ticking clock in that cutscene was such a brilliant touch, too, that builds the tension so much. I also like Daniella's chase music.
Daniella is much more of a threat than Debilitas. She moves faster, carries a weapon, closes doors behind her, and she also knows the mansion much better because she's the maid, which makes it harder to hide from her. Because of her self-loathing, Daniella has an aversion to her own reflection. Lucky for us, someone placed some mirrors throughout the old mansion. Now that we know one of her weaknesses, whenever we're being pursued by her and pass a mirror, we can throw back the covering and Daniella will get distracted by her reflection for a moment. But I think the most unnerving thing about Daniella is that sometimes she doesn't chase you. Sometimes it's cleaning time.
Miss, it's cleaning time now.
Oh my God. Also, be careful when interacting with her in her supposed docile state, because in one area you can trigger a cutscene where she trades her shard of glass, already a dangerous weapon, for an even deadlier hot poker. Lovely. Daniella is a really fascinating character. She covets Fiona and her body, and the fact that she can actually feel emotions and be human. I think she's also jealous of the fact that other members of the household want Fiona. And again, as with all the pursuers, it gets wrapped in a sexual angle. And I really like how, for the most part, that's just surface, and there are deeper, even more disturbing things going on underneath that complicate each of the antagonists' fascination and desire for Fiona. And we'll of course look more at this when we meet the next two pursuers. Fiona comes across a very curious room that begins to flood as she passes through, and now we're trapped here. This is where things start to get a bit weird with physical spaces. Clearly, the old mansion has some unique architectural flourishes, and we'll actually be doing some puzzles to get parts of the mansion to flip and twist around, giving us access to new areas within it. Not to mention, because of that flooding earlier, we find out at one point that we are completely underwater in this section. Eventually, Fiona makes it to a garden of mandragoras. We need one of these for a puzzle, but the little buggers don't like being picked. And this garden happens to be Daniella's pride and joy. A white mandragora needs to be given to the creepy hand that pops out of the darkness of the crypt entrance in the cemetery. And this gives us access to the crypt, which is actually a safe haven that no intruders can ever enter. It's such a relief. Whenever you're being pursued in this area, you can pop down to the crypt and find refuge. Down here, there's a puzzle involving a golem. We've actually already seen a puzzle like this right in the beginning of the game, and it involves typing the correct combination of letters onto a nameplate, and then inserting the plate into the golem to control it. The path through the crypt is blocked by fire, but the golem can extinguish the flames. There's only one way forward, but several other places can be accessed by using different letter combinations. There's an interesting puzzle in the library area that will allow you to watch a film reel that you can pick up earlier on. Who filmed these scenes? By eventually taking the correct path through the crypt, you wind up in a new part of the mansion, and here's where the whole twisting architecture of this place takes an even bigger turn. Yeah, this part here really reminded me of Thief, the Dark Project, specifically the mission, The Sword, and any game that reminds me of Thief is an instant classic in my book. But yes, we've fully entered the realm of the surreal here. We were just taking baby steps before. I like how the camera pulls back when you first enter this to really drive home the what the hell aspect of this moment. A few rooms later, and Fiona arrives in a large area with a skylight that has several differently colored pedestals on tracks placed in conspicuous positions around a large mirror in the floor. Welcome to the Daniella boss fight.
Blood, flesh, woman. You vile creature. You lure the man into your filthy body again and again, and you are allowed to do that because you are a precious, precious little princess. Precious, precious little princess.
Fiona needs to move these pedestals into place while being hassled by Daniella. The good thing is you can knock her out for a while with a combination of Hewie's attacks and Fiona's own, creating some time for block pushing. Once the pedestals are in place, the mirror on the floor lights up and Daniella is once again enraptured or enraged by her own reflection, and her scream shatters the skylight.
Good boy.
Daniella drops another key that allows us to progress further. It's always nice after a boss fight because you've got some time to just wander around the previous area and pick up some items that you may have missed and just explore around threat-free. There's some strange creatures hanging around though, like these homunculus who just stand around mumbling. We caught a glimpse of one for the first time in the Escher stairs room, but here's one just chilling out in the hallway. Hewie will stop and growl at it, but if you don't attack, it won't do anything. There will be a few others scattered throughout the rest of the game, again, all non-hostile. At the bottom of another spiral stairway is the door we can unlock with our new key, and here we also meet a new enemy. The failures. These annoying little creatures that run up and grasp onto Fiona's legs. They don't do any damage and you can easily just kick them to death, but if they grab her, they let out a piercing scream that will draw the new pursuer to her. Luckily, when we're first introduced to them here, we don't have to worry about it yet. These guys don't show up all that much, so they're not too bad. After heading further into this older, more decrepit part of the old mansion, we find a laboratory room that has a scribbled note on one of the desks. It talks about an item called the Prima Materia. It's an important ingredient in creating something called the Godstone, and apparently Hewie stole it. I'm gonna rename you Yuffie. Fiona stumbles into a room with a green vat and a human body floating inside. Genova? Enter Riccardo, our third pursuer.
Miss Fiona. Now, if you would please come with me.
No, I don't want to. Please let me be. I want to go home.
But Miss Fiona, you are home. This whole castle is all yours. So, Miss Fiona does not wish to stay at her castle. You miserable wench. You were given the greatest gift of all, and you don't even appreciate it. I can't believe the Azoth was wasted on you.
Riccardo's got a flintlock pistol, which seems like a big threat, a pursuer with a firearm, but actually he can't hit anything with it. Even if he's standing right in front of you, if you just wiggle back and forth, you'll never get shot, at least in my experience. Only when standing still was I ever hit by the pistol. Now, there are a couple of ways to incapacitate Riccardo for a good portion of this area. One of the best ones is in the lab room where we found the note about the materia. There's a part of the floor that is clearly unstable. It looks different from the rest of the room and creaks when you walk over it. All you have to do is lure Riccardo over it and his fat ass will fall through the hole. Turns out Hewie left the materia behind some gravestones in a part of the cemetery that we couldn't access earlier. Hewie fetches it, and the next challenge is turning it into the Godstone. We've been running past several machines throughout this portion of the mansion. There's an extractor, a purifier, and a synthesizer. Putting the materia through the machines in the correct order will produce a white Godstone. You can also produce a red one, but that's no good for our immediate purposes. Also, I didn't really notice anything weird about the machines themselves while playing, but when I checked the concept art later on, I realized they had some pretty interesting designs. Now we can head back to the mansion entrance where there's a statue holding a set of scales, and placing the Godstone in the scales opens the front door. Finally, after all this time, we've escaped the castle and the mansion. Breathe that fresh air, take in the green of these trees, but get ready for tragedy.
Hewie! Hewie!
Hewie! Fiona finds Hewie shot in the leg in the forest and tends to his wound, but Riccardo shows up. There's nowhere to run in the forest though, and we have a confrontation on a cliffside.
Why are you doing this? What did I do?
You inherited your father's Azoth. That is what you did.
What Azoth? I don't even know what that is.
That Azoth belongs to us, Fiona. Don't you see? You are our child.
Stop! I am not your child. I know exactly who my parents are.
Fiona, we are, or rather I am, knowledge. I hold invaluable information from the dawn of time. I am a great alchemist. I will not die. I am Aureolus Belli, and I... Look at me, Fiona. Look.
What?
Just like your father, Ugo.
Daddy?
We are clones. We are clones.
Let me just stop here for a second and say that while this is an interesting revelation in the story, the delivery completely falls flat. We've only caught glimpses of Fiona in the car with her parents before the accident. We've seen her mother's face, but not her father's. So when Riccardo reveals his face here and Fiona has this reaction, the scene plays it like this should be a big surprise for us, but it's not. We have no idea what Fiona's dad looks like, so we're just pretty much being told by the characters' reactions that we should be shocked now. I don't know, I just thought it was really weird the way this was handled. Afterwards, we get a clearer picture of the car accident. Riccardo was the one who ran Fiona's parents' car off the road. Fiona's mom died in the impact. Her dad survived, but then Riccardo pulled out this weird dagger and stabbed him. And this is where we finally get a clear view of Fiona's father's face. I feel like we should have seen it earlier. Then we could have been surprised with Fiona when Riccardo revealed his own face. Anyway, as Riccardo said, he and Fiona's father, Ugo, were clones of Aureolus Belli, a powerful alchemist and the original owner of the castle. Fiona passes out, and there's a secret cutscene that can be triggered here by completing certain criteria that shows Riccardo examining Fiona's body.
Another 2 or 3 days at most.
Fiona is then awakened by Hewie. She's locked in a cell in the basement of the water tower, a large structure in the middle of a nearby lake, and this is the next area of the game. If, however, you were a complete asshat and abused Hewie, he will not wake you up and come to rescue you, and you'll get the worst ending in the game. Riccardo says he needs to borrow Fiona's womb to create another clone of himself, this time infused with Fiona's Azoth. We then see Fiona in the bedroom from the beginning of the game, pregnant and laughing, having lost her mind. Let's try not to have this happen. With Hewie's help, Fiona escapes her cell, and the goal here is to make it to the top of the water tower. There are some objects to find scattered around, one of which is a miniature bridge. We'll need that. We also find a note from Lorenzo again, saying that Riccardo has lost his mind and Fiona needs to find her way to the House of Truths where Lorenzo resides. Still holding out hope for Lorenzo being our savior. Getting to the top of the tower is one of the most annoying parts of the game, and the tower itself is a pretty boring design. I praise Haunting Grounds' art direction and level design, but I gotta say, the water tower is the low point. Aside from the small dungeon area underneath, you're just climbing up this empty structure. Riccardo has lost his pistol, but having drunk some kind of super alchemy potion is now invisible. For some reason, he becomes visible when he gets close to Fiona, and we've got to deal with him following us around as we flip switches to move platforms to progress further up the tower. There's no way to really hide from him, so it's just about having Hewie hold him in place and running far enough away. You can't pull the necessary levers to move the tower platforms with Riccardo close by. You'll only get a message that you don't have time and need to get away. This is actually how most of the puzzles and interactive elements in the game work with pursuers nearby, but before you had more space to run and hide and then come back. In the tower, you can only run and hope you get far enough out of his range to be able to interact with the levers. Anyway, after much dicking around, Fiona makes it to the top, which turns out to be a planetarium. There's another floor switch puzzle which you'll need Hewie's help for, but it's easy enough to figure out. The planetarium is the most memorable part of the tower. This room is really atmospheric, and the song that plays sets a spacey mood, which is a nice breather after the tower climbing shenanigans. After unlocking the spiral staircase and placing the bridge piece into the little model up top, an actual bridge will appear from the water. Then Riccardo confronts Fiona and Hewie.
Let me into your womb!
Hey, we finally got to this part, and we've already made it to his boss fight. I told you, these last two pursuers occupy the least amount of Haunting Grounds playtime. Now, Riccardo's boss battle is mechanically probably the easiest in the game, but it's the biggest pain to get right. There are holes in this structure in the middle of the area. Hewie needs to be sent through one of them that has him pop out above the model. Then you need to lure Riccardo in front of the hole Hewie is waiting at, time it just right, and have Hewie attack Riccardo. It's easier said than done. The positioning is very precise, and if Riccardo isn't in the exact spot he needs to be, Hewie won't do anything. Using some of the traps and other items from your inventory helps. Once you've got it right, Hewie will pounce, and Riccardo falls from the top of the tower.
Oh. No.
Good boy.
Back down and across the bridge that Fiona has raised is the House of Truths, where Lorenzo is waiting. This is the final area of the game, and is also pretty short, but it has a more interesting design than the water tower at least, with mirrored rooms and what appears to be a whole other mirrored side to the house itself. I dig it. When first arriving, it's important to do some exploring and find a golden candlestick. We need this. Deeper into the house, we finally meet Lorenzo.
Who's there?
Poor Fiona. Riccardo put you through quite a bit, didn't he? Unlike Ugo, he was always a troublemaker, a bad apple. I, Lorenzo Belli, created them both, Riccardo and Ugo. But then along came that wench, Ayla. She stole Ugo away from me. Of course, then you came along, my dear. My dear Fiona. Fate brought you back to me. And now, you are mine. All mine!
Well, yeah, of course he's a bad guy. Who was really fooled this whole time? Holy crap, this old dude can crawl. He's so fast, it's terrifying. Remember how I said we need that candlestick? Fiona lures him into one of the side rooms with some flammable boxes in a corner and chucks the lit candle. Lorenzo seems to have been defeated and his body is stuck underneath some rubble. If we take a moment to collect ourselves and return, though, Lorenzo is gone. The explosion has blasted a hole in the nearby wall, and this is our path forward. And nope, he ain't dead. He's much slower than before, though, and you can actually use Hewie along with Fiona's kicks to knock him out and steal some items from him. It's pretty funny.
Damn!
After you're done beating and robbing the old man, the next room has a conveyor belt leading to a rock crusher. The machine's on the fritz, so you need to smash into the controls to get it working. Lorenzo busts in, so here's his boss fight. It's a matter of luring him onto the conveyor belt and having Hewie keep him in place, then running over to the controls and bashing into them to get the conveyor belt moving. Make a pancake out of the old man. Lucky for us, that rock crusher spit out a key. This unlocks a door that leads deeper into the House of Truths. Further on, another door will close behind as we enter a hallway, separating Fiona from Hewie, and a young man's voice will taunt her as she tries to escape the hallway.
Oh, you've been very naughty, Fiona. You're causing me much grief.
Is Riccardo not dead? Even when she tries to hide, the voice taunts her.
Do you really think you can hide from me there?
After messing with her for a bit, the door at the end of the hall that we entered opens. But when we pass through it, we're in a different part of the House of Truths. Fiona then meets her new tormentor.
Your Azoth, Fiona, belongs to me.
So Lorenzo has somehow succeeded in making himself younger and comes out looking like a villain from Final Fantasy XII. Also, that face looks familiar, doesn't it? Remember those portraits in the bedroom? Old man Aureolus and a young man Aureolus, staring back at each other, hovering over their prize, Fiona. Young Lorenzo can use alchemy or some form of magical attack against Fiona, and there's a chase sequence with him. Fiona will end up passing through another door which teleports her to yet another part of the House of Truths. There's a short puzzle involving some differently colored doors, and this leads to a room with a lava pit in the middle and an altar where something needs to be placed. Finding that something involves using Hewie to investigate a strange portion of a wall in one part of the house. Fiona feels a sensation in the birthmark on her back, which is noticeable throughout the game but isn't mentioned, and is only focused on in this scene when the same mark appears on the wall and reveals the cane of Caduceus. Now, the cane is from Roman and Greek mythology, carried by Mercury or Hermes, messengers of the gods. The cane also has several ties to alchemy, thought to be able to send people to sleep, awaken sleepers, and revive the dead. Taking the cane and placing it in the altar causes some machines to power on, opening a doorway that we don't have access to yet. First, we're going to have to deal with the younger Lorenzo. And he's got one-hit kill attacks. This is the final boss in the game, essentially, and we just need to beat him up a bunch. No other gimmicks to this fight. It takes a while, and he's dangerous, what with the one-hit kills and all, but there is another method that can help out. Every now and then, some tremors will cause green rocks to fall from the ceiling. Kicking these into the lava pit will cause it to erupt, spreading burning debris around the room. Fiona can walk over this stuff no problem, but Lorenzo will get hurt running into these. Using the fire, with a combination of Hewie's attacks and Fiona's bash move, makes the younger Lorenzo go down a bit quicker. You can also use the controls on the walls to get him caught in the gusts from the large fans in the room, but Fiona and Hewie can also get caught in this too, so I didn't find it as effective. After beating him up enough, he'll fall into the lava. Now the House of Truths is crumbling, and also, oh my god, this dude doesn't know when to quit.
Now we have a burning Lorenzo after us.
The goal here is to escape and not get knocked over by the tremors. They can be avoided by crouching when the shaking gets really bad. But then there's this part where a statue falls and Fiona needs to waste time standing it upright. Wouldn't want this to fall over and break in this crumbling house. When she makes it to the entrance, Lorenzo catches up, and I love this scene. He just stands there screaming until he's finally burned enough that it kills him. And that's it. Okay, now that's it. And here's the icing on the cake. This time you really are dead, you bastard. All that's left is to exit the house and watch the ending.
Thanks, Hewie.
Nice clock tower reference. This is the best ending, which can be achieved by dropping the chandelier on Debilitas and having the best relationship with Hewie. The alternative ending is achieved by killing Debilitas and having at least an average or better relationship with Hewie. This one just doesn't have Debilitas show up. I've already talked about the worst ending, which you get earlier on in the woods by treating Hewie poorly, but there's one more ending that can only be seen on a second playthrough. Remember when I mentioned that if you take out Debilitas with the chandelier and then visit him in his shack, he'll give Fiona a key? Well, by following the path that the key unlocks and finding a special room, Fiona will be able to open the castle gates in the beginning area of the game. You can then escape the castle before even triggering the Daniella portion of the game. Doing this gets us this special ending.
Don't go, Fiona. My life, my Azoth, Fiona.
Now that you've seen the full story, there are a few pieces of the puzzle that are left to fit together involving some backstory not presented in the game. We know now that the entire plot to capture Fiona was Lorenzo's idea. He was the one who sent Riccardo to run the car off the road. Ugo, Fiona's father, and Riccardo are both clones of Lorenzo, who in turn is a clone of the original alchemist Aurelius Belli. Ugo was the first clone of Lorenzo, but was whisked away from the castle by Ayla, Fiona's mother. There are no details about how these two became acquainted, but it happened and this union produced Fiona. Lorenzo was enraged by this betrayal and attempted to create a new clone, Riccardo, but Riccardo was a failure, stricken with accelerated aging. This is why, even though Riccardo was created much later, he appears to be almost the same age as Ugo during the events of the game. Probably due to this, he wasn't the favorite son and has a rebellious nature, dabbling in alchemy himself. We already know that Azoth is the source of life, and some concentration can be found in all living things. This may be why there are empty cages for animals scattered around the castle, and why Hewie is there in the first place. Riccardo was experimenting in extracting Azoth from animals. Debilitas is probably a failed clone of Riccardo's, and Riccardo was most likely also the one who created the dribbling homunculus encountered throughout the old mansion, and the failures too. Aurelius Belli was on a quest to utilize Azoth and discover the ultimate truths of the universe, which naturally would require eternal life. Powerful Azoth is needed to create a perfect clone, and since Fiona is a direct descendant of Aurelius, she possesses a potent amount of Azoth. Lorenzo, the oldest clone of Aurelius at this point, is now withered and old, and believes that by using Fiona's Azoth, he can create a new clone who will possess eternal life and succeed in Aurelius's original quest for ultimate knowledge. However, Riccardo, being the problem child, captured Fiona according to Lorenzo's wishes, but then used his manservant Debilitas to keep her hidden in the castle, which he is the keeper of. He wants to create his own perfect clone of himself to achieve Aurelius's goals. Debilitas, being another failure and possessing the mind of a stunted child, confuses Fiona for a plaything and wishes to keep her for himself. There also may be some remnants of Aurelius's ambition within Debilitas, because when captured by him and witnessing the game over screen, it's clear he does more than just play with Fiona. And again, all of the game over screens are this disturbing. Daniella may also be a failed experiment of Lorenzo's, most likely. He may have tried to make a woman that contained Azoth to create the perfect clone of Aureolus Belli. It's heavily implied that along with not being able to feel emotions or pain, Daniella is probably also infertile. This could feed into the jealousy she feels towards Fiona. She may have tried or been forced to attempt to create a clone with Lorenzo and probably Riccardo as well, but failed. So she's left only as the maid of the estate and basically ignored. Riccardo only pays attention to her to abuse her and attempt to ascertain the whereabouts of Lorenzo, and the old man never even makes mention of Daniella. There's also a darker possibility when it comes to Daniella's backstory. She could just be a normal woman who is kidnapped and suffers from Stockholm Syndrome, an attachment to her captor. Over years of abuse and neglect, she's come to feel as though she has no emotions and can't feel pain. The whole idea of attempting to make a clone with her most likely still applies, and by capturing Fiona and stealing her Azoth, she could be trying to make herself worthy of Lorenzo's attention. She could also just be trying to dick over Riccardo as well. Whatever the case, Lorenzo easily became wise to all of this scheming from the others and attempted to act as Fiona's ally. He's old and feeble, so has no way to fight against Debilitas, Daniella, or Riccardo, so he stays hidden for most of the game and helps Fiona where he can, trying to establish some level of trust. Probably out of desperation, this all falls apart at the end when he finally leads Fiona to the House of Truths, where he's sequestered. There's another cutscene that can only be viewed on a second playthrough where Lorenzo seems to breathe in Riccardo's Azoth after he's left for dead on the bridge outside the water tower. This is most likely how he was able to reverse the effects of aging, and survive being blown up and pulled into a rock crusher too, I guess. And also falling into a lava pit, and still being able to chase after Fiona while burning alive. Weird and wild stuff. Fiona is now the last heir of Aureolus Belli, though she's not a clone, so it's safe to assume that the quest for the ultimate truth that consumed the great alchemist won't affect her, and she and Hewie have effectively put an end to this nightmare. So as for the English title, Haunting Ground, I've seen some people mention that the haunting could refer to the failed homunculus or clones that reside in the Belli castle. It could also represent how the antagonists of the story are not complete emotionally or mentally, and exist as ghosts of themselves, or in the cases of the clones, ghosts of Aureolus. And I mean, yeah, I guess, but I still feel like that's a bit of a stretch. Either way, I do prefer the English to the Japanese title, Demento, but that's just me. After completing the game, you get access to some goodies. A secret room, which is the bedroom from the opening of the game. You can check concept art, rewatch cutscenes, as well as change outfits for Fiona and Hewie. Hewie gets a brown German Shepherd look that increases his attack but makes him harder to control. Fiona gets some of the outfits that she's in throughout the game, but also gets a cowboy outfit where she can use a pistol, as well as a dominatrix outfit and a riding crop. Then there's the frog suit. The last bonus is the minigame where you control Hewie and need to guide Fiona to safety while being pursued by one of the antagonists. It's fun being able to play as Hewie, but it's a pretty basic minigame. Still cool though. Anyway, yeah, Haunting Ground certainly has a provocative and complex narrative running through it, but the game itself is also really well designed. I loved the art direction, the gameplay, and especially the relationship between Fiona and Hewie. There are a couple spots where the presentation of the story fell flat for me, but overall it was thought-provoking and affecting. I'm sure many of you have your own thoughts on things, and the backstory bit I just went over is up to interpretation, since a lot of it is not clearly presented in the game, so share your own thoughts in the comments. But yeah, that's it for Haunting Ground. This video was brought to you by the Dungeon Dwellers, who appear here on screen. They support the channel on Patreon and through YouTube memberships. They voted on this video to be covered. And I'll be doing another poll maybe in a month or so. I have a few games I personally want to cover next, and then I'll put some more recommendations that I've received from people up for a vote. So if you'd like to participate in that, get access to new videos a few days early, get exclusive updates from me, as well as just support the channel additionally, there's a link to the Patreon in the description and a join button for YouTube memberships on this video page. I need to personally thank the people who donate $5 or more to me monthly. Those are the Dungeon Architects, Antichrist Alex, Benifer94, David Carr, Glenn Haven, Goats and Goblins, Half HP, High Food Court, Izzy Lexus, Joshua Ayers, Justin Darnell, Captain Ketchup, Kevin Hanley, Kiowa, Lunar Vale, Meownarchy, Nick Wolf, Nam de Guerre, Richard Cutting, Shannon Gates, and Stefano Irenia, as well as the Dungeon Connoisseurs, Adon, Alberto Amatucci, Alfred Correa, Andy Rahman, Anjin01, Big Farty Nuts, Bunzo, Chaos Arcanum, Churm Slurm, Chiral Spiral, Crassus Zero, Crippler Jones, Dazed Clockwork, Deco, Fangro, Glitterthroat, Hokun Boyum, Harvey Bodega, Irregular Rob, J-Butt Airline, Gemma, Jet Daddy, Joe Goth Joshua Weber, Leica Come Home, Liana, Macrophage, Man with Confetti, Minced Meat, Mr. Independent, Nicholas Leapart, Nicholas Polstar, Noel the Monkey, Normal AI, Old Dead Lemons, Olaf Albine, Please Keep Making Videos, Pretty Cody, Prince Goof, Rainbows 98, Resident Delta, Rez, Ribbon Black, Robert Brandon, Roland, Sable, Samurai 85X, Shark King, Slowbro 96, Solar, Spody, TCB, True Axiom, Tuesday Twin, TV's Brent, Warrior Song, Where Am I? Help, and Zach Diedrich. Thank you all for your support, and once again, thank you for watching. Next time, I'm gonna relax a bit and do a stupid FMV adventure game, so look forward to that. Until then, Haunting Ground. Check it out. Dungeon Chill. Out.